This week, we are diving into the Army of God, a religious cult that took on the appearance of an army led by generals who wouldn't take no for an answer. Join us as we divulge the cult's history, the sinister beliefs and practices, and how members are affected by this dangerous group. I'm Sammy.
And I'm Nicole.
And we are Spooky Sleuths.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Welcome back to Spooky Sleuths.
This week we are talking about a cult.
We love a good culty episode.
We do. We're talking about the Army of God this week. So it all starts back in 1970 with a group called the Bear Tribe.
I swear, like 60s, 70s prime cult years.
Yeah, everyone was in a cult back then.
Yeah.
Lila Carter, who later changes her name to Deborah, and Jim Green are involved with a loving movement.
They're never loving. That's a lie, I guarantee it.
This one I didn't think was too bad.
Okay.
But this was prime hippie era. And
Free love, man.
The couple, they were very involved with the hippie lifestyle. The Bear Tribe was focused on loving the earth and God. They lived off the land and built or grew everything that they had.
I mean, that's kind of cool.
For you, I prefer this modern store. It was a great place for hippies and wanderers and anyone looking for a place to belong. This group also partook in Native American culture.
Oh.
So who were Lila and Jim, and how did they get here? Lila was born in 1947 in Sacramento, California. Lila came from a broken home. Her dad was an alcoholic, and her parents divorced when she was a young child.
Trauma central.
As a product of divorce, we don't all turn out this way. I want you to remember that. But she turned out to be a pretty normal child. She graduated high school and even went to college. She was so ordinary that she worked in a movie theater during college. Like, I feel like that's a typical thing.
Yeah.
I will say I didn't know that they had movie theaters all the way back then. But Lila's family was poor. They couldn't afford a lot of things. She would eat popcorn at work to save money on food, just to give you an idea on how little they had. When Lila was in her early 20s, her brother died of lung cancer. She was heartbroken over the loss. She began searching for something to help her with her grief and help find herself. And she did just that with the Bear Tribe in the remote Sierra foothills. It was here that she met her future husband, Jim Green. Jim came from Kentucky, which is about all we know about him prior to this.
Okay.
The couple were considered more radical members of the Bear Tribe. They would wear loincloths, they howled at the moon.
Oh my goodness.
And they had blood brother ceremonies. Blood brother ceremonies involve cutting your own finger or arm and scraping the wounded body part against the other person's wound. It can also be performed by sucking each other's blood. After this part, you swear an oath to treat one another as a brother or sister. But the couple began to get more interested into Christianity. As they found a love for Christ, they decided it was time to devote their lives to him. In 1971, the pair moved to Montana with the Bear Tribe, where they were, as Lila stated, hippies, wanderers, desolate, chasing false gods, and living only for darkness. One day, Jim picked up a hitchhiker who spoke to the two about Jesus' message of redemption. He led them in prayer, and that was it. The Greens were now Christians. The Greens ended up having 2 children, Sarah and Josh, and completed mission trips to countries like Panama, Aruba, and Nicaragua.
So they went from like one extreme to the other.
Yes. They became completely devoted to the Christian lifestyle. With their newfound faith, the pair left the Bear Tribe in 1973. They started their own community based in the Christian faith. The Bear Tribe broke up 6 years after the Greens left. This was the perfect opportunity to recruit members to come to their group, which they did. One of the biggest beliefs of this new group was that Lila was a prophet. Bet you didn't see that coming.
No, never in a million years. I expected it to be
Jim?
Jim. Yeah.
He has a special power too. But they couldn't just tell people about Lila being a prophet. They had to demonstrate just how connected to God she was.
Did she perform miracles?
Well, she would begin yelling and flailing around on the ground. And when a potential member would question what was happening, Jim would explain that Lila was giving birth. She was giving birth to children in God's kingdom.
I was fully expecting you to tell me she was speaking with God.
No, she's birthing his children.
Okay. That's wild.
Yes. But that's not all. Jim, his little special gift, he could exorcise demons. The weird
Call
part,
the Warrens.
right? Demons are typically associated with Catholicism, not Christianity. You typically have to go to a Catholic exorcist that's been ordained by the church. Whatever. Don't listen to my logic. The weird part about Jim and his exorcisms was that participants would go along with it. They would scream and act like they were in pain.
Oh my gosh.
This performance that the Greens gave was very convincing, and they had people believing them. By 1980, the group had 10 members. This was never a very large group, but they were extreme. The Greens decided to name their Sacramento-based group Free Love Ministries. The members of Free Love Ministries would donate all their money to the group so they could buy property and live on the compound.
Of course they did. Because are you a cult if you don't force your members to give you all their
Some
money?
kind of profit or take all their money.
Profit and profits.
Yes. Over the next few years, the group would grow to 50 members, with many members joining because of homelessness, addictions, and just tough home lives. Other members were recruited by their friends who were already in the group. But they would still prey on their friends that they knew struggled with addiction, mental illness, things like that were easily influenced.
The vulnerable.
Yes. New members would simply attend one of their many weekly meetings, listen to Jim preach, and hear Lila testify. They would hear the couple talk about demons and how demons are ruining people's lives. As the group grew, so did Jim and Lila's authority over the members. Jim was more relaxed and easy to get along with, but Lila, she was a difficult person. She was very controlling.
Of course she is. She's the prophet.
She is. She dictated everything in the members' day-to-day lives. The group believed in strict self-discipline and would frequently practice fasting and held many Bible studies a week. Members of the Free Love Ministries believed that Lila could see into people's hearts and souls. She would just look at members and be able to see everything about them. They described this look that you could just tell she was looking deep into you, not at you. Remember how Jim would perform these fake exorcisms?
Yes.
Well, their obsession with demons didn't end. Members of the group participated in what they called deliverance sessions.
Oh, man.
During these sessions, Jim would exorcise their demons and purge them of sin. Members agreed to do this, and they wanted to do it. They wanted to participate because they would feel accepted and included if they did. During these sessions, participants would scream, vomit, cough, you name it. They would feel phantom pains as if they were really being exorcised. Members truly believed these sessions were real, and it just reaffirmed their belief in Jim
absolutely.
and Lila. In 1985, Jim and Lila made a big change in the group.
Oh.
They were no longer Free Love Ministries, but now they were known as the Aggressive Christian Mission Training Corps, or Army of God. This change brought harsh new order to the group.
Weapons?
No.
Okay.
Jim and Lila preached that God was raising up a militant people, an army meant to be his soldiers. Members were to be obedient. Lila claimed that God was vindictive and hard. She terrified her followers. The pair believed that they were doing God's work on earth through a holy army. With this radical change came new radical rules. Members were forced to wear faux army uniforms every day.
So we ditched the loincloths and now we
Yes.
dress up like we're in the military.
Absolutely. That's how this works.
Makes sense.
All group members, including Lila and Jim, were given ranks. The ranks were based on where they were spiritually and how committed they were to God and the cause.
How much money they're giving.
Lila and Jim had the highest ranks, of course. They were generals.
Oh, of course they were.
Lila began being even more controlling. She directed every moment of the members' lives and became even more regimented with it. She was the absolute authority in this pretend military. Members were forced to live on the compound if they didn't already. They had to work in stores operated by the group, participate in group fasts, and they weren't even allowed to have a television. Doesn't surprise me, though, that cutting off their information from the outside world.
Cutting off any relationships if they haven't already.
Oh, they're about to.
Oh, here we go.
But the generals, they also arranged marriages for their members. They would pick two people to get married and say it was God's word that they unionized their marriage. Children, they had it worse. They were not allowed to have any toys or play. Instead, all children, even as young as 2 years old, were forced to work the same as adults. The generals had complete control over their members. Members were brainwashed into believing and following every word they said. If they questioned anything the generals said, it was the voice of the devil, of course.
They needed an exorcism.
They did. Since they couldn't speak out, members learned to reject any contradicting thoughts. But the generals just kept being more and more controlling. Eventually, members were no longer allowed to contact their families or friends outside of the group. They preached that members must put God before their families and cut all ties with those not in God's army. The family members did not take well to this.
No, I'm sure they did not. They usually don't.
No. In 1989, families began protesting outside the compound. The news and reporters were covering these protests, which was not good press for the group. So Jim decided it would be a good idea to hold a community meeting. At this meeting, he declared the Aggressive Christian Missions Training Corps was not a family church, and they had more important things to do than worry about families.
Like community, everybody, or just his people?
No, that was open to the public.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
He had a meeting to tell them, we don't care about you.
Yes.
Okay.
He even provided scripts to members to read out loud in front of their families, disowning them. They had to denounce their families publicly.
That is horrible.
Yes. But now we have another change. So Lila decided that she needed to change her name to Deborah. In the Bible, Deborah was one of God's judges, as you probably know. I didn't know that.
That's okay.
She believes that she is God's judge on earth. Her favorite way to punish her followers was through public humiliation.
Calling sin on.
She also had strong parenting beliefs. She believed that children should be beaten with belts for anything she deemed as a defect. Not because they did something generally wrong, what we would consider wrong, but for things such as not being potty trained by age 2. Let's just beat them until they're potty trained.
These poor children, I hope, got the therapy that I'm sure they all needed.
I hope so. Members were instructed that if they did not repent and be completely broken of their sins and outside life, they would go to hell.
It's the fear mongering for me, man.
Yes. Deborah also taught that children cannot be put before God. If a member broke the rules, they were publicly punished, like I mentioned. In front of the entire group, members would be deranked, dehumanized, renamed, and shunned. No one dared to go against the grain and speak to a member who was shunned. Even their spouses and children wouldn't speak or look at them while being shunned. When a member was renamed, they were given a humiliating name, such as Forsaken.
My goodness.
Their spouses and children had to call them by this name. And the person often believed they deserved that punishment. They started to believe that what they were named was who they were. Some members would be forced to move into small sheds that didn't have electricity, plumbing, or heat. They had to wear black scarves to show that they were an outcast. They would be kept in this state for months until eventually they were exiled from the group. When exiled, the member was not allowed to take their children or spouses with them.
Oh, absolutely not.
They were on their own with nothing, no money, no possessions, no family. One good thing that came out of being exiled was that they could finally realize the truth. Members could see that the Bible's not being taught correctly. They were being taught the general's version and interpretation of the Bible. They realized how manipulated and brainwashed they are by the couple. In 1988, a former member who was exiled filed a lawsuit for inhumane treatment due to being locked in the shed with no heat, plumbing, or electricity. Of course, the generals denied these allegations. They claimed the member was exiled for sexual misconduct, and they literally buried the lawsuit in their yard. Like, went behind their house, dug up some dirt, put the lawsuit in the ground, and covered it up.
That doesn't just make it go away.
Yeah. Well, they didn't show up for court or present any evidence to defend themselves. Because of this, the former member won the lawsuit.
Yeah.
She got her children out of the cult and back home with her.
Thank goodness.
And she was awarded $1.2 million. But she never got all that money.
I'm sure.
The only money that Deborah and Jim had was in their property. Before their land was seized, members were instructed to remove anything and everything that they could either salvage or use to rebuild a home. They were not going to let a forsaken woman, or a harlot as Deborah referred to her as, to take over God's holy place. So they left the buildings in disarray and moved to Oregon. After the move, Jim takes kind of a backseat role, and Deborah just continues to control everything.
It seemed like he had a backseat role the majority of the time, really.
Yeah.
Except at the community meeting, whenever he said, we don't care about you at all.
Right. But now it's just all Deborah. The members who were more productive would go out on sales trips for months at a time. They would sell artwork and baked goods and send all the money back to the cult. When members went out on these trips, they were not allowed to take their kids with them. Their kids were seen as a distraction to their money-making activities. In 1992, the aggressive Christian Missions Training Corps made their final move to Fence Lake, New Mexico. They purchased an old house that had no living quarters. Members had to sleep on the floor and had no money or possessions. While their parents had to leave for months to sell items and make money for the group, children were mistreated by mainly Deborah.
Of course they were, because that's what we do in cults.
They would be left in the cellar crying and begging to be let out. They would have no food or water and be left in there for hours or days. Not only that, but they would be beaten with a 2x4 that had a nail in it.
Oh my gosh.
The group was not in a good place. Membership was falling, especially after the lawsuit. People didn't want to be associated with the group anymore.
Can you blame them?
But several longtime loyal members stayed. In an effort to get more members, Deborah instructed some members to kidnap children while they were on sales trips, specifically trips that were close to the Mexico border. They were instructed to look out for children walking alone, telling them the kids would be better off living on the compound. Living on the compound than living on the street. One member actually almost attempted to kidnap a child, but thankfully she became afraid and questioned what she was doing. She didn't go through with the kidnapping despite Deborah's orders.
Oh my gosh, that is insane.
Yeah.
Like, Deborah's already basically kidnapping other people's kids, not letting them go with their parents and all that. And now we're just going to start grabbing random kids off the street?
That's what she wants.
That's insane.
They still needed a way to get more members, though. In 1997, the group went on a mission trip to Uganda, where Deborah met a pregnant servant. She asked the servant for her child, and she refused. A few days after the baby is born, Deborah shows up with it. It's speculated that she paid for the baby girl. But Deborah smuggled her back to the United States and presents her to the group as a miracle. That poor baby would have been much better off in Uganda with her biological mother.
Yeah.
Deborah would go on to treat her like a slave. She would work the baby girl so hard from the time she was able to walk, and she would beat her frequently. The poor baby girl developed deformed legs and rickets, which is the softening and weakening of the bones. That can typically be associated with dietary
malnourishment.
Yes. Deborah did not take the girl to receive any kind of medical care, but instead forced her to run every day. Deborah told her that God would heal her if she was obedient. Children could not speak out about any of the abuse or even the teachings that took place at the hands of Deborah. If they did, the parents were instructed to get rid of the child. The generals genuinely believed that members would choose them over their own children.
Her sense of entitlement and self-worth are insane.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
After many complaints to the police after members would leave the group, the FBI got involved in their investigation.
Goodness.
They were investigating physical child abuse done by Jim and Deborah. One former member filed a missing persons report on his wife and 5 sons. When the FBI went to the compound, they spoke to the wife. The wife admitted that the oldest son died and was buried on the property. Apparently, he was just very sick and no one took him to receive medical care. The FBI investigated this and child abuse allegations on children as young as 2 years old. Their investigation also led to evidence of child SA. In 2017, the compound was raided during their morning meeting. Jim, Deborah, and a few members were arrested. They were charged with kidnapping, child abuse, and negligent abuse resulting in death. Deborah was found guilty on 3 counts of child SA, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of child abuse. She was 71 years old when she was sentenced, and she was sentenced to 72 years in prison. But her charges were dismissed in 2022, and she is a free woman.
No.
Yep. She had held like hunger strikes while she was in prison, continuing her lifestyle behind bars.
As a cult leader.
The baby she kidnapped from Uganda has since had 11 surgeries to repair the damage Deborah did to her bones. One of the members that was arrested was Jim and Deborah's son-in-law, Peter Green. He was charged with 100 counts of criminal sexual penetration of a child.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. I couldn't find what his sentence was. But yeah, 100 counts.
That is disgusting.
Yep.
And what kills me is they do all of this under the guise of religion. And no religion I know of teaches that.
No. Mm-mm.
Like, no, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, like
Buddhism.
Yeah. Yeah, I misspoke there.
I like that better.
None of it. Like,
well,
Satanism doesn't do that.
I know.
Like, this is crazy.
Well, Jim was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and he was released in 2023. So they're both free. They're both just out there living their lives. The group is currently active, and they run a website with their teachings on it.
Of course.
But I couldn't figure out if Deborah and Jim went back to run it. As far as I could tell, it was ran by a member who stepped up. Also, if you Google this just Army of God, it brings up an anti-abortion group. And I mean, I just gotta say, they have a picture with blood on hands, and the caption is baby killer with abortion blood on their hands.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's crazy.
That's traumatizing.
Yeah.
You okay? You want to talk about it?
I'm just relieved that I didn't have to write a whole episode about an anti-abortion cult whenever I found that.
We wouldn't have been able to do that.
No.
Because of my very strong feelings.
Yes. So, what do you think of the Army of God?
That got a lot wilder at the end than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Because really the information leading up to what they were charged with is, okay, don't get me wrong, it's bad, but it's pretty...
typical cult.
Right. Pretty mild in comparison to the ones we normally dive into. That got real wild there at the end. Those poor children. I could never.
I know that the daughter that they brought from Uganda, the girl they brought from Uganda, she was one of the SA victims. But
The poor girl.
yeah.
If she just would have... Not she as in
Not-
she had a
yeah.
choice, but if she...
Could have stayed.
Yeah.
Yep. So, let us know in the comments what you think. If you made it this far, leave an army helmet down in the comments. Make sure you check us out on TikTok and Instagram at Spooky Sleuths Pod. Leave us a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. If that's on YouTube, like and subscribe.
We'll catch you guys next week with a new video. And on that note, stay spooky, friends.